stuff. Hey guys, today I'm here with Rik De Voest. He's a realtor out here in the Northshore, also an ex-South African and a tennis player.
Yep, back in the day.
Back in the day. And we're just going to talk a little bit about property and you know, how it works to buy a house and rent and just general chat about all of that. So, Rik, if I understand correctly, here you have a different system than South Africa, where you have one agent that can represent a seller and a buyer.
Yeah, so thanks. Obviously, great to chat and connect with fellow South Africans. Keep following what's going on, and I've already helped a bunch of South African families that relocated here that have been renting buy homes. And you know, one of the biggest differences that I noticed was that understanding of the buying process and how it differs in South Africa versus here. So, you know, typically in South Africa, when an agent has a home for sale, they have a sole mandate, they're representing the seller, and all these buyers come and they look at the home and then they speak with the agent and the agent puts a deal together.
Yeah.
We used to be able to do that for a period, but about a couple of years ago, they kind of changed the law and said now that every single transaction needs to have a buyer's agent and a seller's agent, and they need to be separate. So each party, a buyer and a seller, has their own representation. So it was deemed by sort of the legal side of things that there could be a conflict of interest when there's only one agent representing essentially the seller, and just they could be telling the buyer anything. And with this sort of situation, each party has their own agent. They're relying on that agent to give them, you know, the accurate information, and then they try and put the deal together. So that's kind of the biggest difference sort of for the consumer. Because yeah, when I had some South African families came over, I'd be like, yeah, I'm happy to help, great, I'll send you some stuff. And the next thing I know, they're like, yeah, I spoke with this agent, and I spoke with this agent, and I spoke with this agent, and I'm like, I understand that's how it works there, but over here, they probably told you contact your own realtor first to arrange a showing, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't sound. So I kind of explain that process a little bit to them. And then we kind of go from there, and yeah.
So another question is that came up when I spoke to somebody else the other day is, so I understand that you will, as a seller, you will have an agent. He's the seller. You only give your house to one agent. That's the guy that's going to sell it.
Correct.
And then that guy puts it on the multi-listing services, so all the agents can
have a look at it.
But do the buyers also get a buyer's agent? I mean, do you also, or does the buyers just flop around, or is the buyer supposed to get a buyer's agent who's the person that's going to represent them, and that's the person that's going to find them the house?
Exactly. So again, that's another major difference between South African real estate, which I've started to make strong connections in South Africa and learn about the back end a little bit more accurately. Is that, yeah, we in Canada, and particularly here in Vancouver, have what's called an MLS, which is the multiple listing service. So whenever I take a listing, I process it to our real estate board, and it gets uploaded to the MLS. From the MLS, all of these search portals pull that information and send it out to the web. So you have multiple different sort of search portals. In South Africa, I believe we have Private Property and Property 24 is sort of the main two. Here in Canada, we have Realtor.ca, which is through our real estate council, and more recently now, a company called REW, which is Real Estate Weekly, and actually coincidentally run by another South African guy who just moved here, and it was a buddy of mine. But yeah, so that's kind of the difference, so that all properties are for sale on the MLS. So when you're as a buyer looking for properties, you don't need to go to one agent and say, what do you have for sale? They can just go to a website, and every single property in that area that they're looking at that is listed for sale on the MLS shows up on their feed. Then if they want further information, they, as you said, could contact the listing agent. Because that agent's not allowed to represent them in the sale, he's going to tell them you have to go find a buyer's agent. So that's where, you know, an agent would then, or a consumer would then go to another realtor and say, you know, do you know this area? Show me your experience and knowledge on this. Can you help me with the process? Now, there's no cost to a buyer to have a realtor representing them. Commission is paid for by the seller, which is the same in South Africa. And so then that agent kind of helps that buyer. And the way it also works here is, let's say, you know, I list your home for sale. You've now sold, but you need to buy. So then I've represented you in the sale of your property with another agent representing the buyer. And now you're looking to buy. Now I'm helping you on the buying side, find another property and make sure that the dates line up and your needs, and I've got that, you know, rapport and trust built with you. I know what you're looking for, come to know you a little bit better. So it just makes sense that I then help you on the buying side of the process as well.
So you don't get sellers agents and buyers agents. One agent can be a seller's agent and a buyer's agent, just not on the same
deal. Transaction, exactly. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's quite interesting because, you know, like, I mean, then I'm wondering, I just walked down Marine Drive here. Sorry, we're sitting at Delaney's coffee shop on the Marine Drive. I just walked down Marine Drive and there's all these real estate offices with the houses in the window. I mean, what's the idea behind that?
It's the same thing. It's basically just to get eyeballs on the property, stopping at the store window. And if they're curious on something that they see, then they go inside.
And then hopefully you become the buyer's
exactly, or even the seller is looking and say, oh, that house is close to mine. It looks very similar to mine. They're selling it for $3 million. You know, I wonder if it is the same. Let me speak with the agent and see. And then that way you try and pick up sort of another client potentially, or seller client. Yeah.
Interesting. And then of course the one thing that you got to watch out for if you come here and you're not on a PR or citizenship, you're just on a work order, a work permit, then you've got seller's tax, or what's foreign buyer's
tax on the buyer. Yes.
And how much is that? What is that all about?
So back in 2016, the government introduced this foreign buyer tax for any non-residents or non-citizens, and it's restricted to certain areas. Our Vancouver real estate market was just absolutely flying. I think we're at about 30 to 35% appreciation in prices per year for like 2 years. Wow. So the prices really ramped up, but they were speculating that it was driven by a lot of foreign buying and making it unaffordable for locals. So they implemented this tax of 15% back in 2016, and then they upped that tax now to 20%. So unless you are a resident or a PR, you're going to have to pay that. The one thing to note for South Africans in particular is that if you do come on a special visa type, I believe it's the BC Provincial Nominee Program, you are able to be exempt of that, as well as, and again, just best to double check, but if you're in the process of getting your PR and you buy a property and you pay that 20% tax, if you get your PR within a certain time frame, I believe it's 9 months or a year after you've taken occupancy, you're able to claim that 20% back. But it is an upfront cost. So you're paying plus the 20% only to get it back. So it's, and in dollars, you know, that adds up quite a lot. So a lot of people, they just say, I'm going to rent first, wait till I got my PR, learn the neighborhoods, get an understanding of how things operate here, schools, jobs, commuting, and then they're like, okay, finally, I like this area, or I'm settled here, or I want to move there, and then they look to buy.
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. You also want to feel it out first, because it's all good and well to look on the internet at places, but when you're actually there, you start getting a feeling for the place. So, 20%, that's actually quite steep, eh?
Yeah. So it was there
to... What's the average property price here in the Northshore?
Well, there it's expensive, and Vancouver, you know, it offers a lot. It's been voted one of the top 5 cities in the world to live in. It's got a favorable climate relative to the rest of Canada. Everyone's like, oh, Canada, it's snowing, it's ice cold. You know, our winters, yes, it rains a lot, but we're at probably, 4 to 7 degrees is our average. But it rains here, but then it's snowing in the mountains, and we all go skiing. And then in the summer, I mean, like the ocean's right there. You can go hiking, some of the best mountain biking in the world as well. And people pay for it. And so in North Vancouver, the average detached home price, so a single family home, like with a garden and everything, that's at about 1.8, 1.9 million. That'd be the average price. And in West Vancouver, where we are here, a little bit more desirable, it's kind of the Beverly Hills, let's call it, of the US. That average price at the moment just went over $3 million as the average. And that's for a detached home. In terms of, then you have your condos, your entry level, or your townhomes. So condos are around 600,000, townhomes are around $1 million in those areas. So it is a lot of money, especially when converted to rands. But yeah, once you're in the market, the appreciation of the real estate really does help, and you're earning in dollars.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be growing all the time. I mean, Vancouver didn't even have that dip in 2008 when the whole thing went down. It's like Vancouver just kept going up and up and up and up.
Yes, I mean, I know prices have pretty much doubled since the financial crisis in 2008-09, and then yeah, if you bought a home for 900,000 in 2008-09, it's now probably worth between 1.7 and 1.9 million, depending if you've done updates in areas, and if you have water views, it's more sought after too.
Wow. Yeah, that's actually very, very interesting. So you say most people would come here and they would obviously rent first and just try and find it out. So in your opinion, what's the best place? Where's the most, well, here's a better question. Where's the most South Africans in this area?
Oh, you know, I would say North Van has a fair amount, but it is more expensive, it is. And then out towards there's little areas in Maple Ridge and Port Coquitlam, a little bit further out where it's just a little bit more affordable, and people then commute downtown. We've got a sort of a SkyTrain. The transit system's really, really good here. Yeah, and it is a common question. You know, I've had numerous random South Africans reach out to me on Facebook or social media and just say, "Can you help me find a rental? Like, we're moving to Vancouver. Can you help me find a rental?" And again, it's a little bit different compared to South Africa, where there is no actual sort of market for agents to help new residents to Canada find housing. There's landlords, then they have agents that represent them, and often you try and go to them, but then it's like South Africa where they only have stock for themselves.
Yeah.
And if they don't have something for you, they're going to be hard pressed to put you into somebody else's property, because they only get paying by the landlord for putting a tenant in place there. So the most common place people do look is online, on areas like Craigslist and other sort of search portals. There are companies that are sort of property management companies, but again, they're representing the landlord, and that's where they.
So I mean, in South Africa, when we used to look for rentals, you'd go to some realtor, but what happens is those properties would be listed. The landlord would list his rental property pretty much with a crap load of agents.
Yeah.
Do they do that here too, or is it more just a one-on-one?
Well, it's actually it's pretty much only one-on-one, but the majority of properties that do come up for rent are people just do it themselves. Like a lot of homeowners, they actually rent what we call basement suites, and it's a concept for South Africans that's hard to understand.
Oh, yeah, we've got to talk about that.
I know for me, when I came here, and my wife's like, "Yeah, we'll just rent out the basement suite." I'm like, a stranger living in our house? Like it doesn't. But then you realize that stranger, and you get to know them, and they're end up paying $1,500 to $2,000 a month, which $2,000 a month covers a $500,000 mortgage.
Wow.
In terms of its pay, under our current low conditions, probably not as much, when the rates were higher, but that helps you a lot.
That's
a big chunk. So we see a lot of homes where the main house is where the family lives, and then downstairs they have a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom sort of suite. Sometimes it's below grade, underground, which is not as favorable for tenants, and other times it's just a 2-level home. Family lives up, and they've got a sort of a rec room downstairs, and then a little 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom basement suite that they rent out, or when family members come, they stay there. But that's fairly common in Vancouver.
Yeah, but I also have to say, I mean, when we got here, it was like, Belinda, we were looking at properties. It's like, wow, I don't want to live in somebody else's home.
Yeah.
But it's not really like that. I mean, it's like the property is divided. So the basement suite has got its own bar, its own.
It's completely separate.
And
yeah.
everything, and it's locked. You can't go in, but you don't.
Yeah. You've got your own space, your own access, your own
like
laundry.
It's just like living in a townhouse.
Yeah, exactly.
Just on the top floor, and other guys on the bottom floor.
Exactly.
But it was weird when we got here. We were also like, what's happening?
Uh-huh.
Another thing I wanted to ask, maybe this is just a random question.
Sure.
I've been looking at a lot of properties around here, and I see, especially in this area, it's like 4 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, 5 bedrooms, 11 bathrooms. I mean, do Canadians go to the bathroom more often, or what's the situation?
No, I mean, so yeah, if you have, we call it a powder room, which is just a 2-piece, so basically a little toilet and a wash basin, that's considered a bathroom. So, on these mansions that are 5, 6, 7,000 square feet in size, The bedrooms are really huge. They all have their own ensuite bathrooms. So you got your 5 bedrooms, 5 ensuite. And then, they have sort of a steam room downstairs, or they have a powder room on the main floor. And then they have another sort of shower as you come in for the garage. Let's say you've been out mountain biking or dirty or sweaty, they have another room down there. And then potentially one more upstairs. So that's kind of why it has it. But those are more on sort of the newer, ultra luxury sort of properties.
Because one of the properties we were looking at renting initially, that was like a 3-bedroom just up the road here. 3 bedrooms, 11 bathrooms. I'm like, oh my God.
Wow. I haven't seen that before. That's a lot of fun.
Sounds a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
But anyway. Okay, well, that's very interesting. What else is there that you can tell us about property here? Okay, sorry folks, there was this loud garbage truck downstairs that just made a lot of noise, so we had to cut out there for a bit. Okay, Rik, you were telling us about the
buying
process, the buying process. I think let's just start right from scratch again.
Okay, so as I said, first step one is you go to a mortgage broker or a bank and you say, I'm looking to buy a property, can I get pre-approved? I don't know how much I can buy. And they take all your financials, they look at your job, your income, a whole bunch of variety of things, and they spit out a number and say, you're pre-approved for an $800,000 or $1 million loan by us based on your income. Then you go shopping and looking at property and, reach out to a realtor over here. And then you go looking at property and say, I want to buy, my bank says I'll get a mortgage for X, but I can buy a property up to 1.5 million, let's say. So then we set up a search and you look at properties, and if you find one you really like, then you're like, okay, I want to put in an offer on this property. So you make the offer to the seller. It kind of goes back and forth between the buyer's agent, seller's agent. You hash out the details, finally gets accepted. Now, when you have an accepted offer, you have normally...
You were talking about the 5%.
I'll get to that, yeah. So when you have an accepted offer, you normally have about 7 to 10 business days to do your due diligence. So that would include, a property inspection, sending the documentation to the bank, and the financing being approved, saying, yes, we agree, the property is worth what your offer price is, we will lend you the funds, and you do sort of all of this review. Once that is done, your due diligence periods, you remove these subject conditions from the offer, from the contract, and now we have a firm and binding contract, but you need to have monetary consideration. Now that amount needs to be 5% of the purchase price, and that's called a deposit. So let's say on a 1.5 million, you would need $75,000 to be paid over. It gets held in a trust account with the real estate company, and that will form part of your purchase price in 2 or 3 months' time whenever you take ownership of the property and move in.
Okay.
Now the other part of it is banks will require what's called a down payment. And so if the purchase price is above $1 million, then that needs to be 20% of that purchase price. So again, let's use the $1.5 million example. So you've paid a 5% deposit, which is part of the offer, and then you still got to pay an extra 15%, or come up with a 15% cash to form part of your down payment that goes with the bank to make a minimum of 20. It could be 25, 30, whatever, depending on your payments and how much cash you have available. It's never an issue if someone's sort of selling and buying because they're taking the equity from the one property and applying it to the next. Yeah. But if you're just getting in, it's really hard to come up with that.
It's a big chunk of change.
It is. And having the deposit as well, that 5% available. And then, so let's say you've made the offer, it's got accepted, you removed your subject conditions and paid your 5% deposit. On the contract, we'll have what's called a completion and a possession date. And that's normally in 2 to 3 months, depending on when you and the seller have negotiated that date to be. Now that completion date is the date that the money changes hands and the date that the ownership changes hands, and then you move into the property a day later.
Okay.
So it's a little different in South Africa, where you send the documentation to the conveyancers, the lawyers, and then it goes to the deeds office, and then you wait.
Yeah.
And you're never sure what's going to happen. Over here, the documentation goes to the lawyers, and then on completion date, the lawyers send the documents to our land titles office, which is the deeds office, in the morning, and in the afternoon,
it's registered.
it's done, right?
That's amazing.
And you're an owner. So So that's how it works over here. So a little different to South Africa, but
So
yeah.
to clarify a couple of things. Number one, the 5%. You got to pay that when you put the offer in.
Well,
or you pay it
a week
after
after.
the due diligence.
Yes. So you have what's called the due diligence period, or the subject conditions, which allows you to still walk away from the contract if you find anything you don't agree with. In an inspection report or whatever, you're like, oh, this is going to cost me too much to fix. I don't want to do it. I didn't know about that when I made the offer.
Yeah.
It allows you to move away from the contract with no obligations. Once you remove that subject condition, you have to pay a monetary consideration of 5%. The reason for that is, let's say you're selling your home and I make an offer on it and it gets accepted and I pay over the deposit, and now you've gone, because you've sold, you've gone and made an offer on somebody else's property because you've sold your property for X and now you want to go buy something else, but you're basing it on that sale.
Yeah.
Now, if this person walks away, you now lose out on that property, right? So what we have is that 5%, saying that if this buyer walks away from the deal, they lose that 5%.
Yeah, and it's also, I guess the thing is, if the whole contract's accepted and everything, and if the deal's done and he walks away, then you've got to start over because you've taken your property off the market from the time that the deals come in. So
Exactly, yeah.
sense.
So that's why we have that 5% deposit.
Okay, and then the next question is the 20%,
Yep.
the bank. So basically, if the bank says, I'll give you $800,000 mortgage, then you can buy a house for $1 million
If you have 20%.
if you have the 200K to put down.
If you have 300K, you can buy for 1.1.
Yeah.
It all just depends on the amount that they've sort of pre-approved you for. And that 20% is only on properties $1 million and more. If the property is less than $1 million, then you can have a lower down payment of 5% or 10% or whatever, but it comes with another fee called a mortgage insurance fee. Basically, it's an insurance policy for the bank that means you don't walk away from this deal and they're left with this amount of money that they've loaned for you to buy the property with. So if it's less than 20%, you have to have a mortgage insurance, which is another fee on top of your mortgage payments. If you have above 20%, you don't need that.
Okay. Which brings me to another question completely unrelated to property buying, but more towards the renting.
Mm-hmm.
When we were renting, we saw renters insurance, some properties required renters insurance. What is that even?
Well, it's exactly what it implies is meaning that if you have, let's say the property that you're renting has a leak and it damages sort of your insurance, your personal belongings, you need to have a policy in place to cover that. And so you need sort of tenant insurance covering your possessions within the property, because the landlord's not going to cover your possessions.
Okay, no, I understand. I thought that it had something to do with hey, if you run away and you don't pay the rent, then there's the tenants in the...
No, normally there's same thing. We have a deposit, and it's normally half a month's rent, and that's paid, up front, and then that gets held if you walk away or if there's damage when you leave. And if not, then you get the deposit back.
Okay, so renters, because I saw, some properties, some rental properties required renters insurance, and others just didn't. So others were just...
Yeah, and again,
your problem.
and a lot of times that'll just depend on who the landlord is, right? If they're an experienced person, they will know that they're protecting themselves by requiring their tenants to have that insurance. If it's a homeowner who's never done it before, they don't know the process, they're just going to say, yeah, pay me the money, and they just don't know.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's just normal insurance. It's like you're insuring your own stuff, and the landlord just wants to make sure you are insured so you don't come and complain.
Because let's say, his washing machine at the place that you're renting, because that's his property, leaks and damages your stuff. Now you're going to file a claim, but also your insurance is going to be like, oh, and he's going to be like, oh, and so it's just best to have insurance or...
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, Rik, I think, unless you've got something else interesting that you can tell us, I think...
I think, I know Vancouver's on the other side of the world for a lot of people, but there's a fair amount of South Africans here, and we do get a lot of dentists and doctors and miners that kind of do make our way here, but there's a strong community and we all stick together, and there's a bunch of, now with social media, on Facebook or groups, of sort of South Africans in Vancouver. You know, if anyone's looking for questions or information on the PR process, or you know what happens, you just post a question there, and there's so many people that respond to that. They're so helpful. And
I mean, I saw it also when we came over. You ask a question, and everybody just jumps in and tries to help out. So
exactly.
It's really cool.
They all know where you've come from and what they've been through, and they're like, yeah, we did this. I would recommend doing this, not this. And you just have to ask.
Brilliant. So guys, if you have any other questions for Rik, just let me know. I mean, I see him regularly. We can always do a follow-up and add some questions or answer some other questions. One thing I can tell you is that we love it here. Vancouver is absolutely amazing, and yes, it's expensive, and yes, we are not on a PR, so we can't buy a property just yet, and we still got to live with the rental side of things, but I would buy a property in a heartbeat as soon as I can over here, because the value over here, I don't think, you know, the thing is, especially here in the West Van and North Van, you've got the mountains on the one side and the ocean on the other side, so there's no more new land coming up.
No,
you know,
it's just staying in real estate, location. Right?
Yeah. What was it? Somebody said to me on the channel the other day that Caulfield, where we are, is the most expensive zip code in Canada at the moment, or something.
Yeah, well, Caulfield's there. There's more Altamont, which is a little bit below that. There's probably, but that whole little pocket, offers some big properties, sort of more private, good ocean views.
I was I thought about something else. I was at Lions Bay the other day, and I was speaking to some of the people from there, and they were saying that that's also still a little bit cheaper than West Van and North Van, and it's actually such a beautiful area.
Yep, and so for those that don't know, you have North Vancouver, then you cross over sort of the Lionsgate, well, the barrier there where the Lionsgate Bridge goes across into West Vancouver, and then the inlet goes up towards Squamish and Whistler, and along that coastal route is where Lions Bay is. It is deemed still part of West Van, but it is a little bit further out, and so as anyone knows, the further out you go from sort of the core, the more affordable it is. But they do offer some spectacular views of the inlet, and a value for money is a little bit better, but you are that little bit further out.
Yeah, but I mean, when Rik says a little bit further out, it's literally, I think, from our house, it's a 10-minute drive to there, on the highway. So, you know, I'm really thinking the views out there is absolutely beautiful. It's just so cool.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
So yeah.
Cheers, guys.
If anyone has any questions, my name Rik, R-I-K, really easy to remember, and happy to answer or reach out on any sort of platform, and here to assist where I can.
I'll put Rik's details in the bottom on the below the video. So yeah, reach out anytime. One thing I can tell you about the South Africans around here in Canada and in Vancouver, like Rik said earlier, everybody is always happy to help and ready to help. So at any time, just shout, and people will answer questions. That's what they do. All right, cheers.
Bye.